How are you feeling?
Today, in general?
Just in general. I imagine it's like day to day, right?
Yeah, it's day to day. Like, you have your good days and your bad days, and you have to take it a day at a time. Because if you go down the black hole of everything that went wrong, you can't get out of it. You know, I'm still active duty in my department, supervising 10 to 12 guys at a time. So when you look at it from that aspect of work, it's like, I'm telling guys, everyone knows our story, you know, at my department, and calls will come up, suicidal calls will come up, and the guy's armed, and they're like, "Hey, Sergeant, what do we do? You know, how are we gonna take this?" And we go about it, because I don't want to be put in the situation that Ben was in, or have my guys do the same. You know, it's day to day. I have to take mental breaks and purposely put out time where I don't have to think about fighting for Ben, because I need, like, if I don't put my mask on, I can't help the next person. So if I'm not doing okay, I'm not gonna be able to help Ben the best way that I can. So it's a lot. There's a lot going on of trying to get his story out, because no one knows, because we weren't allowed to talk about it.
Let's start from the very beginning, because you and Ben, who is your husband, who's also a police officer, came to me, was it 4 years ago?
Yeah, it was
nearly
November of 2018.
And we had talked about that circumstance because it just happened 6 months prior to that conversation. And there was an investigation, and a lot of the things that we talked about, we could not talk about out loud because it was still pending. Mm-hmm. I heard that story, which we'll actually talk about the details of that. When I heard that, I was like, well, that's easy, man. You're just following your own doctrine, right? For your own rules of engagement, your own protocol. And anybody who's put in that situation would understand kind of the use of force policy and how that would be a clear-cut case of it and self-defense.
Right.
Walk us through the situation, who your husband is, and then how it kind of unfolded, the actual event.
So my husband is Ben Darby. We've been married it'll be 6 years this October. We met in college, went to school, had classes together, started dating. I was his boss at school for the job that we worked. Eventually got married, started police academy in February of 2016, got married October 16, and we both worked for different departments. So I worked 12s, he worked 8s. So going through the academy, which we didn't do together because Huntsville Police Department has their own academy, and then I went to like a state farm academy. But we didn't see each other a lot because of that.
Because you were in different departments.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we got cut loose, respectively, in July. So we were our own solo officer. April 3rd, 2018, Ben was on duty for Huntsville Police Department, working he was second shift out of the West Precinct. And
he had only been on the department how long as a solo officer?
18 months.
18 months, okay.
So a call came out over the radio. Dispatch asked for, I don't know what their 10 codes are because I don't work there, but basically expedite because there's a holding call that needs to get answered. And the call was a suicidal man. He called dispatch and said, "I've got a gun. I'm going to blow my brains out. The front door's open." So anyone would think that's a possible ambush because, you know, he's armed. He's welcoming you into his house. And nationwide, officers are taught to not go into a house with a guy with a gun because you don't know what's going on inside that house. You know more about the outside, and there's more that you can control. So you surround the house and call them out. Yeah,
that's not a normal patrol call. That's like you expedite. You do something more advanced.
Right. So you would have, like, patrol would go and make the initial contact, but you would have negotiators and possibly SWAT or whoever on standby or getting ready to come to that. And so the Officer Piggies and Officer Beckles answered that call, and Officer Beckles asked if there was anyone else available, And Ben was on his way to the precinct to download some video, and he thought to himself, well, that can wait. I'm going to go help them because of the call. So he goes to the call. He's the third one to get there, and he's expecting to surround the house and call the guy out because that's what they were trained to do, and that's what they'd done in previous engagements with calls like that. He had been on calls where they had surrounded the house, called the guy out, and were able to treat the guy. And he got there, grabbed his shotgun, thinking it was going to be a perimeter. And as he's getting out of the car and making his way up to the house, he doesn't see Pegues or Beckles. So he runs up there thinking, because it came out guy with a gun, so the possibility of someone getting shot is high. And he sees Officer Pegues inside the house with no cover and concealment. And then he sees Officer Beckles standing in the fatal funnel on the front porch in the doorway. And she's talking to the guy. He's about 21 feet away from her with a gun to his head, and her gun is at low ready. And then she's just kind of talking to him like this, like, hey, why do you want to take your life?
And he's got a gun in his hand.
He's got a gun like this. And she's just talking to him with her gun down in her open hand. And
standing in the middle of the open.
Yeah, she has a couch between him and her. So it's not going to stop a bullet. Mm-hmm. And then Officer Beckles is standing, it was a brick house, so he was standing partially in the doorway. So he had somewhat of a cover, but not that great. And so Ben gets there and he says, point your gun at him, he can shoot you, talking to Pegues. And she didn't relay to Beckles or to Ben that there was another person inside the house other than Parker, the guy that called. And so she's talking to him, and when you deal with someone and you can relate to this, you can hear in their voice or how they're talking if the situation is going well or not, and if you need to help them out.
Yeah.
If they're not able to speak efficiently and get their point across or get the person to do what they need them to do, or if they move deeper into a room like she did, that's a silent invite for you to, hey, come in here and help me. And so Ben and Officer Beckles came in the house, and Ben raised his shotgun at the guy and said, put the gun down. And now at this point, the guy had like 5 or 6 commands to put the gun down, and he didn't. So there's your act. No action is an act. You're deciding to not do what you're being told. And the guy said, no, I'm not going to do it. And Ben said, I'm not going to tell you again, put your gun down. And as the actor, I know when I'm going to go like this. You don't know that. Yeah. So action versus reaction. Mm-hmm. It's taught nationwide. And when Ben said the second time, put the gun down, he shrugged his shoulders and went like this, moving the gun forward towards Ben, and Ben neutralized that threat, stopped the threat to his life and the other 2 officers' lives that were in that room. Cleared up to him, handcuffed him, moved the gun that Parker had away, and then, went over the radio, shots fired, all that. Everyone came to the scene, and then he was taken away to get tested at the hospital per protocol, and then
for drugs,
right, drugs and alcohol. Make sure he wasn't intoxicated at the time because he had discharged his weapon. And he called me. I was at work that day. He called me, and I was going to an alarm call, and he said, hey, if you hear anything about me, just know that I'm okay. And I said, well, can you tell me anything more? Like, did you wreck your car? Why are you going to the hospital? And he said, I can't tell you, just know that I'm okay. I've got to go. And then I got off the phone, and I'm trying to think, well, what happened? And then I realized, why else would you be going to the hospital unless you discharged your weapon? So I knew he was involved in a shooting. So I answered my call and called my supervisor, and I said, I need to go home, family emergency. And I waited for him to come home that night, and you could tell he was very heavy. So that, he just shot someone. And I said, are you okay? He said, yeah, I'm okay. And I said, you want to talk about it? And he said, no. I said, all right. So let's go to bed, and, we'll get through whatever this is. We're going to get through it. And that was April 3rd. About 2 weeks later, he had an incident review board. So that's something in the department where they review anytime a firearm is discharged to make sure it's within policy, you didn't break any state, federal law, anything like that, that it's a good shoot. And so he and the other 2 officers came in front of this board, which included department personnel, the district attorney's office, people from city legal, and they all discussed the case, and they found that Ben was within policy, and he went back to the road. They found that the other 2 officers were out of policy and that they failed to recognize the threat of Parker with the gun, lack of threat assessment, and officer safety. So they were made to go back through remedial training. Not Ben, but the other 2. And then...
Do you know what was the policy that they deviated away from? I mean, it's obvious, but is there actual doctrine?
Again, I don't know like the verbiage because I don't...
Paraphrasing,
The going into the house with a guy with a gun, so not calling him out, and then not your officer safety. You know, he turned the gun on them, and it was the gun was loaded with buckshot. It was a flare gun loaded with compromised buck. So all 3 of them would have gotten shot because of how short that barrel was.
Yeah.
So basically lack of officer safety, and then lack of recognizing a threat to your life and going into the house when you're trained not to do that. They had to go through full remedial training for that, the other 2 officers. So the end of April, he was cut loose to go back, full duty, back to the road, and he went back to the road. And then the end of May, the chief pulled him in and said, hey, the district attorney is trying to charge you with murder. We got to pull you off the street. So he gets pulled off the street. The district attorney's office has several conversations with the chief's office, and they say, if you fire him, we won't charge him with murder. And Chief McMurray said, no, I'm not firing him. He didn't do anything wrong. And then April...
They said...
If you fire him...
Then we won't charge him with murder.
Yeah.
And was that through an email or through a letter or through an inquiry?
Just
communication,
just talking.
And I'm assuming the chief testified to that or said that is why we know that. How do we know that it happened? That the chief got communicated that from the DA's office?
I don't know if it was written down or just from talking to the chief. I've had conversations with him and people and their command staff about this. And he told Ben directly, hey, he said this, and I said, no, I'm not going to fire you because you didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And then that was communicated through lawyers and all that.
Yeah.
So that was May. By August, he had a grand jury, and he was charged with murder August 3rd, 2018. So he was formally booked in to the jail. We had to bond him out. He came home.
How long was this after we talked the first time?
So this happened before we talked. So we saw you in November.
Yeah, he had already been charged.
Yeah, he had been charged. He was charged in August, and then we saw you in November.
Yeah, they filed the charges.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, and the way they file charges is based on a jury, basically a panel jury.
Right. So they had it was a grand jury indictment.
Grand jury, yep.
So they had people from Ben's department, people from his training staff who taught him action versus reaction. One of those guys who was involved in a shooting and failed to react quick enough and got shot in the face. And he used that specific real life event while teaching Ben's academy and the academies after Ben. This is why you can't wait for the gun to be pointed at you.
Of course.
Which is case law. Graham versus Connor. You don't have to wait for the bead of the weapon to be pointed at you.
Of course.
And the people from HPD who testified to the grand jury, when they left, they said the grand jury was 100% on board with it being a good shoot. And then the DA held them over for a day and somehow changed their mind, which it's not hard to get a grand jury indictment. You can indict a ham sandwich. It's not that hard. But again, I don't know what was said in the grand jury because I wasn't there and we weren't made privy to it. So he got charged in August, and then April 3rd, 2019, so a full year later, he had an immunity hearing within the courts for qualified immunity. And the judge, it was a full day ordeal. The judge said, you got to give me a couple days because I got other things on my docket. I'll give you an answer by Monday. And I think this is a Wednesday or Thursday that we had court. The very next day, 8 a.m., no opinion. Denied. So she denied it but didn't say why. She couldn't give us a reason why she denied it. She just said, no, you're denied. So we went through the courts with that. The appellate courts kicked it off because of a technicality, because they said we didn't give them paperwork that they needed. Well, we couldn't do that because we never received the paperwork from the trial courts in time to give it to them. So we told them, you'll be able to access it online by the time that you get this, but we don't have a physical copy to give it to you, so we can't give you that paperwork. Well, because of that, they denied it. So then 2020 in COVID, so they shut down everything. So you didn't have court. January, MLK Day of 2021, Ben's lawyers and the district attorney's office got together. The district attorney's office walked over the street and talked to his lawyers and said, hey, why don't we give him this deal? No prison time, 5 years probation, and he takes a manslaughter charge. So take this deal, no prison time. We don't have to go to court.
They're looking for an out.
He'll still be a felon.
Yeah.
But he won't have to go to prison.
And this is the time of all, was the guy black?
No.
That was white.
He's a white guy. He's a white supremacist.
But this was all the time that all the social.
Yeah. So like George Floyd happened, obviously, in 2018. Yeah. Or in 2020, I'm sorry. Ben's stuff was all in 2018. So the anti-police culture was there, but it wasn't as hot and heavy as it was in 2020 and even now.
Yeah.
And so
they asked him for that deal, and he says no.
Ben was like, no, I didn't commit murder, and I didn't commit aggravated manslaughter.
Yeah.
I'm not taking it.
Yeah.
And so we went to trial May 3rd, 2021. It was closed to the public, so even I wasn't allowed to go as his wife, which is a constitutional violation, Sixth Amendment right. And then, so we watched.
Why was it closed?
Because of COVID.
Okay.
But from what Ben told us, because again, he was the only one allowed in there, and we would see him at like a lunch break.
No transcripts?
We finally got the transcripts last, I think, November.
Okay.
So, which plays a big part into it, because there's 2 witnesses that weren't allowed to testify to the jury, but they are allowed to testify to the court for the transcript. So one of those being a neighbor of Parker, who Parker had several conversations with his neighbor, stating how he hated police, how he had a plan to get a cop in his house and kill him. And after this had all gone down, the neighbor came to our lawyers and said, hey, you need to know this about Parker. And so at trial, he gets on the stand. They do the whole introduction, and he gets asked, what do you know about Parker and police? And the neighbor said, Parker told me that he hated cops. And the prosecution, objection, that's hearsay. And it's not hearsay, because you and I are having a conversation right now. So if you or I were to talk about it or testify to this conversation, it's a direct witness testimony. If someone else listening into this wanted to say, oh, well, I heard this and they said this during their conversation, that's hearsay. Mm-hmm. And the judge said, no, your conversation with him is hearsay. I'm not allowing it. And so our lawyer said, well, we want it on court record. And she said, okay. So she kicked the jury out of the room, and the neighbor was allowed to testify to the court jury, or the court record for transcripts, so that if it did go to appeal, which is where we're at now, it's documented for these judges that are going to look at his case. But the 12 people that were going to make the decision to see if Ben Darby was guilty of murder or not weren't allowed to hear that testimony. And that happened with the training advisor, Jason Moore, with Action versus Reaction, who got shot in the face. Same thing. He wasn't allowed to testify to the jury. He was allowed to testify to the court record. So it's on the transcript, and how he trained Ben in several other academies after his, Action versus Reaction, and why you can't wait.
Who's the judge?
Her name's Donna Pate.
Okay, and that judge is a state.
She's a circuit court judge for Madison County.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was her first criminal trial. She, before that, had never done a criminal law case. It is all like school issues.
I've never heard of a judge telling or agreeing with an objection that a witness to a conversation that they personally took place in could not testify to that conversation. That's insanity to me. That's the whole point of when you take a witness, you put them on the stand, they're testifying their witness of the events that took place in their head based on the conversations they had or the interactions they had. And that just, okay, so that takes place. There was another issue you said.
So the fact that the other officers had to go through remedial training and that Ben did not, the jury wasn't allowed to hear that. The jury wasn't allowed to hear that case law. So we're all ruled by laws that have been made because of prior incidents before our time. One of those being Graham versus Connor, which is the bedrock case law for police use of force. That wasn't allowed to be heard to the jury. Montoute versus Carr wasn't allowed to be heard to the jury. Palm Beach Sheriff's Office versus Krasinski wasn't allowed to be heard to the jury. All those deal with police use of force in shooting someone. And the jury wasn't allowed to hear that. If they were allowed to hear that case law, which exonerates Ben wouldn't be in prison right now, or the last 11 months that he's been there. But because they weren't allowed to hear that, and the testimony of the two witnesses, he's in prison. Because they went with, in Alabama, there's no like murder 1, murder 2, it's just murder.
And it's a life sentence.
It's
20 years.
It's 20 years to life.
Yeah.
So if he would have gotten a 20-year sentence, he would have been eligible for appeal. So if we could afford his appeal bond, he would be home right now. But the district attorney's office said we recommend a minimum of 25 years because he never showed any remorse and he's not sorry for killing Parker.
So he can't appeal.
We can appeal, but he has to be in prison until the appeal comes back. He's not going to come home until
can't come home.
He can't come home. If they would have given him just 20, he would be home right now. We would have found a way to pay his bond.
What is the reasoning behind like this? This for me seems like it's setting a new legal precedent when it comes to use of force policy across the United States. Because basically we're saying if a law enforcement officer confronts a person with a gun and they're in fear for their life, which is a personal feeling.
Objective reasonableness.
Objective reasonableness is the legal. Why isn't that a clear-cut case of self-defense? I don't understand how a jury can determine outside of the doctrine and policy that law enforcement officers have to abide by and you still get charged with murder. What is the gap here? What is missing here in this whole thing?
So the district attorney's office during the entire trial never proved that what Ben did was murder. And even the jury was like, is there not another charge? Because this doesn't fit. And they were told, no, it's either murder or it's not. And so they deliberated. Court was ended on Thursday. Right after lunch, it ended. So they had all day, the rest of the day, Thursday. Friday morning, one of the jurors had a panic attack and had to go to the hospital. So I don't know this to be true or not, but it begs the question, was she the only holdout or was she one of the holdouts? Because you have to have a unanimous decision. You can't have 4 says he's guilty and 8 says he's not. Was she a holdout and she getting pressured? Just say he's guilty so we can go home? Because everyone hates jury duty. No one wants to be a juror. And so they had to restart deliberations because one of the alternates had to come in. And because he wasn't privy to all that conversation and deliberation prior, they had to restart. And they had his decision right before lunch. But Ben said, so the verdict comes back and we are rushing to the room that they have set up for us to watch the Zoom feed. And Ben's in the courtroom, obviously. And he said he walked in and the jury members walked in and every female in the jury was crying and wiping tears from their eyes. If you're going to convict someone of murder, I'm not going to cry about it. And I don't think your normal average American would either. If they really did commit murder, if you're going to send Jeffrey Dahmer away, yeah, I'm not going to cry about that.
It's inclusive.
Right. And he said every female was crying and men were like physically like holding their head and raking their face. And none of them would look at him. You know,
I can't, it's hard for me to fathom because it's just, to me, all of the extra stuff doesn't matter. Like the fact that he communicated that he wanted to kill a police officer, I mean, it matters in context for his personal situation, but it doesn't matter because the policy, I mean, everybody knows this. A warfighter, a law enforcement officer, a first responder understands the action versus reaction. That for me to create an action that takes 0.2 of a second, your reactive, even just the thought of thinking to move your physical body would take, if not that same amount of time. So you would be already an action behind, a movement behind.
Right.
And I mean, we teach this in self-defense and self-protection. Special Operations Command teaches it in hostage rescue. We learn it as a protocol because, you know, our rules of engagement coming into a room with a person with a gun, we would put that person down no matter what, because we would never be in a situation where we would wait for action to be behind and risk the lives of us. And it's one of the reasons why we don't teach police officers across America SUL or Temple Index. Both SUL and Temple Index are tactics used for maneuvering around civilians or citizens in a protection status to not flag them because of safety. It's actually an institutional protocol for safety. The reason I would hold SUL is because I don't want the gun presented and aligned with a potential threat. But that changes once the threat's in front of you. Because if a threat's in front of you, if that gun's in SUL, which is down and pointed at the ground, or Temple Index, which is up near your head, then the time it takes you to drop that barrel in orientation and then go through a shot process of finding the front sight, red dot on your gun, it would be too late. You would be shot and killed. So a person holding a gun to their head is a clear-cut case. In fact, one of my instructors, Matt Vandy, who's a Denver SWAT officer out of Lakewood, one of his officer-involved shootings involved the same scenario. The guy had a gun by his side. Now, they contained the scene and called in SWAT because they wouldn't put patrol officers, certainly at SUL or standing in an open threshold. They confronted him with a shield. Both of them had visible lasers on him to minimize even the transition in the shot process of their focus from target to front sight, because we identify threats by looking at the person in our depth of field. So this idea that we could potentially transition from identifying a threat, now moving our focus to our gun and driving that physical hand to alignment and even getting a front sight picture is illogical. It's not going to happen. So the guy had the gun by his side. They told him to drop the gun based on their commands and their protocol. He didn't, and it was a classic suicide by cop. And he moved the gun, which is movement, which I'm not going to wait for the assumption that he's moving it in my direction if we give him the commands. Stop, drop the gun, don't move, drop the gun. And then he moves the gun, and they shot and killed him. And they did so in an instance. So, you know, breaking a shot in basically a quarter of a second, right? That whole deal is just commonly known across every training institute, every professional post-certified trainer. I'm post-certified in California. I teach counterterrorism to law enforcement in California and across the U.S. I teach SWAT teams. I teach patrol officers. This is just bananas, because every expert that you talk to who understands protocol, SOPs, doctrine, and also training will tell you the same. And I don't get why. I'm looking for the anomaly. Like, what is going on here? Did Ben say he wanted to kill a guy? Is there something political? I just don't get it. What is your feeling generally about the whole circumstance of why they wanted to put Ben in prison for murder? Because there obviously was an agenda.
There's an agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's bad blood between the district attorney's office and his department. The chief investigator at the DA's office used to be HPD. He got out, had a bad background with things that happened while he was at the department, and got a job with the district attorney. There's stuff between the DA's office and the department, and
Same chief right now?
He retired in, I think it was the end of February, end of March.
And same district attorney now?
Yes, and he's getting reelected because no one ran against him.
Who's the district attorney right now?
Broussard.
What is it?
Robert Broussard.
Robert Broussard. Mm-hmm. And he's the district attorney
for Madison County.
Yep. And your husband Ben was a police officer
for Huntsville City
in Alabama.
Correct.
And the county covers Huntsville.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And the chief, have you talked to the chief at all?
Yeah, we've talked several times. The chief came out, I think, end of March, beginning of April, and because April 4th was the first day that I went public with all this. I got the okays from my lawyers. All of our appeals, they asked me to wait for the appeal to get put in just because of strategy. And I got the green light, and they said, you're full send, do what you want. And I said, it's about time because he's sitting in prison. And I went public on Instagram, all social medias, and started to tell our story. And people, I'd get messages, this is outrageous. Why are we first now hearing about this? Well, the judge put a gag order out. And so when Ben was charged...
What does that mean for people who don't know?
So a gag order is you're not allowed to talk about... The media is not allowed to cover the case so that there's a fair trial. We were told that we couldn't talk about the case, like me, myself, or his family or whoever, because we would go to jail for it. Because it would be a violation of the gag order, which I just learned recently that only applies to the media because of your First Amendment right to freedom of speech. But, I've never done this before, and I didn't have any...
So they were threatening you, saying, hey, you're not allowed to do this.
Yeah, you're not allowed to talk about the case until you go to court. So I was silent because I didn't want to end up in jail too. We don't need both of us in jail, And so the chief came out, had a press conference, and said, I support Ben Darby. Ben Darby's not a murderer. Those were his words. We back him. The mayor said the same thing. Huntsville City Council agreed to pay for his trial, so we didn't have to pay for any trial costs. They covered him. Especially in today's day and age, if a police officer is in the wrong, they're dropping him as soon as they can.
Yeah. They're distancing themselves.
Exactly. And that's they didn't do that. They supported him from the get-go in everything that he did. And so then the district attorney came out and had a press conference and said, no, Ben Darby's a murderer. He should have never been a cop. He's a disgrace to the badge, yada, yada, yada. And so then the judge said, nope, gag order. You're not allowed to talk about it. So from 2018 until 2021, there was no discussion about Ben Darby publicly because of the gag order. So the chief and I have talked. He publicly stated, I'm Chief Mark McMurray from Huntsville Police Department, and I support Ben Darby, Officer Ben Darby, in the actions that he did that day. And he still does. The mayor and the city still support Ben Darby. Now we're at the appeal process. So Madison County District Attorney's Office is not involved. The state attorney general is.
Is that good or bad?
Well, it's both. So our attorney general is Steve Marshall, and he's running for re-election on the platform that he supports law enforcement. In 2018, there was another shooting in a city outside of Birmingham. It was an active shooter at a mall at Thanksgiving at Vestavia Hills Mall, or the Galleria is what it's called. And it came out, it was active shooter, and the officer, all he knew was it was a black guy with a gun that had shot. And he saw a black male with a gun, and he shot him, and it ended up being the wrong guy. And the Attorney General's office had to do that.
Was it a guy just a random guy with a gun?
I don't know all the details of it. I just know that
it wasn't the shooter.
The guy the officer shot was not the shooter.
Wow.
And so the Attorney General's office was in charge of that investigation. And at the conclusion of his investigation, he said he cannot ethically charge that officer because of Graham versus Connor, Montude versus Carr, all the same case law that we tried to present in our case. He said, I can't charge this guy ethically because it would be wrong.
And he didn't get charged.
So then Ben's stuff happens. He gets charged and ultimately convicted. 2 weeks after Ben was sentenced, the Attorney General was in Huntsville for a Back the Blue pro-police event. And so I went to it. And after he got done speaking, I went up to him and said, hey, Mr. Attorney General, my name is Keelin Darby. I'm a police officer, and I named my department. And I said, I'm also the wife of Ben Darby, who was a Huntsville police officer that's now sitting in prison for murder that he didn't commit. Now the case is coming to you, and I need you to get him out of prison because you stand for law enforcement. Or that you just told us all, you stand for law enforcement. So, do your job. And we have these little business cards, and I'd given him one. And he looked at it, and he looked down at his shoes, and Chief McMurray was standing by, and he came over and was talking to the the two of us. And the Attorney General looked back up at me, and he said, you're a police officer too? And I said, yes, sir. I'm a police officer also. So not only does this affect me personally, because that's my husband, and now he's in prison, but if I go to work tonight and I shoot someone, I could end up like him now, because professionally it's going to affect me. And he just looked at his shoes again, and then he looked up and he said, well, I appreciate you introducing yourself. And he walked away. Ethically, he can't talk to me about the case. Course. I understand that. And I'm not asking for any favors. Yeah. But if you support cops, support him. He shouldn't be in prison right now.
So does he have the opportunity now to affect change? Is it because it's in the appeals process? It's in the appeals process.
So his job is to uphold convictions. So when we
not to question his district attorneys, but to uphold
convictions,
because it makes the state look bad when they're appealed.
Right. But Huntsville Police Department asked, and I believe our lawyers did also, for him to issue an opinion about Ben's shooting, and he didn't do it. It's an election year, and politics have been involved since the beginning of Ben's case. He's trying to get reelected as the Attorney General. Is he trying to play it safe until November? I don't know. I don't know what his agenda is, or why he hasn't come out. But you can't say in 2018, I can't ethically charge this officer because of these case laws, and then Ben's shooting happens and we go to court in 2021 and ask for his opinion because it's the same case law. And he hasn't said anything about it. He did say the chief of Huntsville went and talked to the Attorney General, and he said, this will get turned around once it hits my desk. Well, sir, you've had it since April. Why are we waiting?
So Rob Broussard is the district attorney in Madison County.
Right.
Yep. His phone number is 256-532-3460. They have an automated email process. So that number is going to be in our notes. And then what's the name of the state attorney general?
Steve Marshall.
You got your pro timer here, John? You do? We'll pick one up at the store. I want to do a tactical review downstairs with her and test the times of moving the gun from my head to the target and breaking the first shot, and testing the times of moving from Sewell to the position.
So we did
with Sims.
So we did. Ben and I both went to an FBI 3-day officer survival school.
I remember you guys talking about this.
Yeah,
This
is relevant.
This is before the actual shooting, right?
Yeah. So we went to that October of 17, and it's 3-day class done by the FBI, and we went through several scenarios. One of them being a guy with a gun. And how quick how quick this is, because of the microphone, how quick this is, and you're not going to pick it up. You're not going to beat me to bam. And we all went through this scenario, and we all shot, because you can't wait for this or this. As soon as there's movement, and because people have everyone's Monday morning quarterback, police and non-police. And they're like, well, he told them to drop the gun. What if he was going to drop the gun? I can drop the gun here without pointing it or coming forward. And he was given 7 commands to drop it. And like I said earlier, if he was going to drop the gun and comply, he should have done it the first time. It was his decision to not do that and wait until the 7th time and then act on it, and Ben stopped that threat. Parker was given his first chance to help on the line with dispatch. On the 911 call, you can hear the dispatcher say, "Stay on the line. I'm going to get someone here to talk with you." And you can hear him say, "No thanks," and he hangs up. And then the dispatcher tries to call him back several times, and he won't answer the phone. So the first opportunity he had for help and to help him out of his situation was long before Huntsville police officers arrived. It was on the phone with dispatch. He wanted to die that day. He just didn't have the gumption to do it himself.
Yeah, a lot of people in these cases or these scenarios try to introduce like an emotional tether to kind of work in themselves through the understanding of why things took place. The reason doctrinally, whether it's the FBI or an institution or as trainers, I'm a federal law enforcement trainer. Mm-hmm. The reason we have to create these protocols is because if you don't go into these situations black or white and you involve emotion, it is going to create a more passive response, and you're not going to be able to act accordingly. And I just want people to think about the same scenario where the guy pushes his gun in the direction of the officer who's standing in the middle of the open behind a couch and shoots her in the face. Mm-hmm. And a piece of buckshot goes through her eye and lodges in her brain and kills her. Mm-hmm. And then how that would be presented, mm-hmm. right? One, you go into a situation, and I don't care if it's a child with a gun.
Right.
The risk to your life requires the same protocol. Commands, stating very openly your intent, and directions you want from the person with the weapon that could kill somebody, and then them to follow through with those instructions. Anything else is going to be responded to with an escalation of force, which is obviously, I have a gun and I'm pointing at you. That is technically a risk mitigation tactic. Because if I point a gun at you and I say, drop the gun, I'm giving you a option. I'm putting you at a crossroad. I'm saying very, very clearly, you have 2 options here. You could drop the gun and this could be over, or you could lift the gun, present the gun, or move, and I could shoot you in self-defense of my life. Mm-hmm. That juncture has to be immediately driven from an officer's perspective to dominate the situation, so that none of this emotion, none of this empathy, none of this passive communication could create a state where the officer's reactions are not going to be conducive to their survival. And I don't understand how there's any other, I mean, we've gone over this many times. There's no other option here. There's no other option. Patrol officers on scenes with people with guns are not negotiators.
Right.
The protocol does not warrant negotiation. It warrants the gun in the fight, clear-cut commands, and then execution. And that's the problem with law enforcement officers across the board, is these kind of things happening create doubt. It's the same doubt that JAG officers and commanders who are doing 15-6 investigations on soldiers, including myself. I was under an investigation for shooting a terrorist overseas. The Uvalde active shooter, when he crossed the lawn yesterday, a report came out that an officer had the ability to shoot and kill the suspect before they even entered the school. That officer called for permission to dispatch. Through dispatch, he called for permission to his chain of command and asked, am I allowed to shoot this guy? The investigation, because the investigation was released yesterday publicly, which included a multi-page report, stated that any officer in their right mind should have known their protocol to be able to stop that shooter, because they would have assumed that that shooter with that gun was an active threat to the public and should, and within the rules of their engagement, to end that. But I don't think that's the case, because if we have situations like this across the country, because I hear about this all the time. You're the third person I've interviewed in the last 60 days regarding the same kind of instances of wonky laws being manipulated for political favor. Is creating doubt in officers. And we expect them to do something about it. When 19 officers, however many now that have been determined by this investigation, standing in the hallway with guns, I hate it, because I want to be that guy running in there. Yeah. I know a lot of law enforcement officers that would have done that. But when you look at the current climate of how we treat our police officers, what do you expect from a guy who's living in the same trailer park in the same community he polices because he can't afford, because he's not paid properly. Right. He or she's not paid properly. And then that they're being micromanaged and threatened with murder for doing their job. Right. Trying to get home to their families.
Because you had people like I said, I had someone, I took off, obviously. I didn't go back to work for a little bit. And the first day that I went back, I had a guy come up to me and he was like, well, I don't agree with what your husband did. And I was like, well, you can go pound sand and never talk to me about this again. Like, you have no right to tell me I don't care what your opinion is. Yeah. I don't need to hear it. You can keep it to yourself. But I've heard people say, people come back to me and say, hey, people think this because they're not going to come and tell you, And they said, well, why didn't he just tell her, like, grab her and pull her out of the house? Or why didn't he? And it's like, there's no time. And everyone's like, well, he got there and he ran up there and he yelled at her and then he shot the guy.
Exactly.
This stuff happens this quick. You don't have the luxury of sitting in this studio going frame by frame in air conditioning talking about, oh, he could have done this or he could have done that. No, it's real life. He had 11 seconds. From the time that he got out of his car to the time he broke his shot, he had 11 seconds to determine that guy has a gun. She's not covering herself. She was at Sewell talking to the guy. At Sewell and like directing traffic with her hand. We don't want you to hurt yourself. Why are you thinking about hurting yourself today? At any moment, bam, you're dead. She couldn't have brought her gun up. And Ben gets in there, drop the gun. I'm not going to tell you again, drop it. Bam.
Yeah, and I think technically he doesn't need movement to determine that person's a threat after the command's given if he's holding a gun. You don't need movement.
Right. Right. Graham versus Connor. You don't have to wait for the beat of the weapon to be pointed at you. And then there's Alabama statute 13A 323. If you have a immediate threat in front of you that's a danger to your life or another person with you, you are allowed to eliminate that threat. And Ben was, like I said, taken away August 20th. I had a meeting with our post secretary first week of September. And I referenced that statute. I said, well, what about this statute? I said, there's 10 police academies in the state of Alabama, correct? And he said, yes, there are. And I said, no, we're still teaching brand new rookie cops that if there is an imminent threat to their life or a person next to them, they are allowed and required to eliminate that threat that poses a threat to their life. And he said, yes. I said, if that's true and we're still teaching that and it's still on the books, why is he in prison right now?
Exactly.
And he was like, I don't have an answer for you, ma'am.
Yeah, if I I mean, I think about this situation and how I've taught patrol across the United States. If I was teaching this specific scenario and I had an officer come into a room with a guy with a gun, the status, the emotional status, even the composition or disposition of the person in the room with the gun is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Right. The guy could be sitting down with the gun underneath his leg with his hand on the gun. The guy could be, if the gun is 5 feet away from him, different consideration. Mm-hmm. That's an imminent, not an immediate. If the guy is holding a gun, he could be holding it in his pocket. He could be holding it in his jacket. It's why officers who are in pursuits in vehicles, when the guy breaks out and he's got a gun in his hand, he's an immediate threat.
Right.
He doesn't have to be shooting. He could be running and his arm positioned because he's building momentum to run faster away. If he's holding a gun, he is a immediate threat to the public and to those officers' safety.
Right.
If I was teaching that scenario, I would have the officer come into the room and the gun would be aligned with the potential threat. As he gets orientation of where the threat is, he drives the gun to the threat and he gives a command. And he says, drop the gun. If the guy does not drop the gun, you're cleared hot.
Right.
Cleared hot. There is no like, hey, drop the gun. I'm going to wait for you to point this gun at me and I'm going to break a shot. I'm giving you clear commands. I'm telling you what to do. You have a gun in your hand. You're a threat to our lives and the lives of the people around you. If you don't drop the gun, I'll shoot you. That for me would take like no time, because it would be drop the gun. What do you do? Drop the gun. And the more drop the guns they get, the more likely that the threat is going to be able to get the jump, because we're proactively giving the command of execution, which is letting, or the preparatory command, which is giving them the up on the command of execution. We're saying, drop the gun. Now the guy's like, okay, now I need to navigate this scenario. What is my best tactical advantage here? Mm-hmm. So the more time in between that and the actual movement, the likely you are to see things degrade for the officer. And then their emotional capacity to deal with that situation, mm-hmm. because they feel empathy in the middle of an engagement.
Right. Ben didn't want to shoot him. He gave him a second command, drop the gun. And in court, they wouldn't objectable reasonableness. It's through that officer's eyes who used that use of force, how they viewed it, not how you view it, yep. or Joe Blow views it. It's the officer that uses the force.
It's their perception, yeah.
Their perception. That was Ben's perception was not allowed. They had to look at it through the female officer, Officer Pegues. She wasn't threatened. So because she wasn't threatened, Ben Darby shouldn't have been threatened. No, that's not how that works.
Wow. And the fact that she even stated she wasn't threatened is against her own policy, mm-hmm. against the institution that trained her, and against logic and common sense if she understands tactics at all.
She testified that she did not feel at the time of the call, during that situation, she did not feel that she was in threat of her life. After going through the remedial training that she was required to go through, she said, yeah, I guess I could have gotten shot.
What is the status of her in this situation? Because I feel like if this situation unfolded and she wasn't in the room, mm-hmm. completely different scenario.
If Ben would not be in prison today if they never went in the house, if she would have followed their training. The last that I heard, she testified in court that she works for the FBI. I don't know if that's true or not. All 3 officers that were involved that day no longer work for Huntsville Police Department. She got rewarded, or I see it as a reward. After the incident, they made her a school resource officer. And the school that she was there to protect had a gunman nearby. The guy never made it to the school, but it was just a call that there's a guy near the school. And so a bunch of patrol officers went to that call for obvious reasons. And one of those guys I'm friends with as well as Ben, and he told us, he said, yeah, we got there and told her, the real police are here. You can go back to your office. Don't worry about it. Yeah. We'll handle the threat.
Yeah.
Because you didn't do it with Ben Darby, and now he's in prison.
The fact that she's a police officer at all.
Right.
I mean, if I'm the chief of police or a supervisor, a sergeant even, and I find out that one of my officers was inside the room with an armed gunman at Sewell.
She's at Sewell.
with a presentation of her other hand up, which means even more so, she's not in a position to drive the gun to the threat, and she's negotiating with her hands, I would fire her.
And when Ben got there, he told her, point your gun at him. He can shoot you. You can see her body, because I've seen all 3 body cameras more than I wish. You can see her bring the gun up, like very weak, put the gun up, and then you can see her whole body, her whole camera shift. The gun comes off of Parker. She looks at Ben. He's not going to shoot us, and puts the gun down.
What?
So in that split second of he's not going to, bam, I'm dead. Because I'm focused now on
she's checked out.
She's checked out the whole time. She didn't think this guy was going to kill her.
And the fact that she's contesting.
The fact that she's alive right now, you know, she should be thankful for Ben, because she would be dead right now. If Ben never got in there, she'd be dead. I 100% believe that.
If she's in a position where she's with another officer and she's having to be told to present her gun to the threat, and then she's contesting in the middle of a confrontation with a person with a gun that he's not going to shoot her, or what is I don't understand how that isn't a big part of this case. Like, that completely is incompetence.
None of her training and what she didn't do was allowed in.
So none of the errors that she made was allowed to be communicated to the jury?
Yep.
Why?
Judge said no. You have exculpatory evidence you have one after another of things that would have exonerated Ben.
All of this is context to the case.
Right.
How would this not be?
She said it's not allowed in.
Did the jury see the footage
Yes.
of all of the cameras?
I believe so. I don't remember, again, because I wasn't in the actual room, and the video would get cut off periodically.
And there was 12?
There's 12 jurors. There's 4. You have 12 plus 2 alternates, so they all sit through it. And then when you go to deliberations, the 2 alternates, you don't know who you are as an alternate until it's time to deliberate. So the 2 alternates get removed, and the 12 go in and talk. And then if an alternate is needed, like they were needed, then they get introduced. But then they have to restart deliberations all over.
And none of the jurors have come forward and openly communicated at all, or are they held under a gag order?
They haven't. There was something on Reddit about one of them saying how she was on the case. She had a negative view of it. I don't think she saw it the way myself and a lot of other people see it. But no one has come forward that I know of.
So that you said the Attorney General, is that guy?
Yeah,
right
that's
here?
him.
Okay. So this is the guy who's Steve Marshall, and he went to North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Alabama School of Law. And this guy is the guy advertising that he is pro law enforcement.
Yeah.
His office main number is 334-242-7300. And we'll add that to the notes as well on YouTube and the podcast. I'm assuming they don't have email. No, it's an automated email link, but I'll put that up on my social. So walk me through the appeals process. That's where it's at now. How long do these things normally take?
So the thing that is the most frustrating is there's no timeline on the judges. So it's at the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals, which is a board of 5 judges. It's either 5 or 7. And they have an undisclosed amount of time to look at the case. So they can look at it today and make a decision, or they could look at it next Easter and make a decision then, or they could wait 5 years and look at it. There's no pressure. Where like for us, you have to have your stuff in by this date for your briefs. And you're allowed extensions because of the complexity of it, which we took. We had all of our stuff filed, I believe, February 1st. It was in February. The Attorney General's office waited until the end of March to get their stuff submitted. And then we replied to that and had that submitted the end of April. So The whole package has been with the judges since April. It's July now, and they haven't looked at it. When I looked, every Friday they come out with their rulings of whatever cases they looked at this past week. So this past Friday, the 1st, I went on the website to check, and Ben's case wasn't on there. Or they didn't have anything for the 1st. I'm assuming because of the holiday, because of the 4th. So the week before that, when I looked for that, they didn't have anything listed. All the decisions come out on Friday. I spoke with our lawyer yesterday, and he said he hasn't heard anything. We have no idea when they're going to look at this. And that's the hardest part, because we're reliant on them to look at it. I can't, other than try and get the word out, which is what I'm doing now, I can't do anything to expedite this process for my husband. He will sit day for day until they decide to look at his case. And if they do the ethical thing and say, yeah, what he did was correct according to all this case law and everything that wasn't allowed to be presented that's on the court record, I'm praying every day for a reverse and remand, meaning they're going to reverse his conviction, he'll be acquitted, and we're done. Or a reverse and render, we're done. If they remand it, it'll go back to a trial court, specifically Madison County. So if they do that, we're moving for a change of venue and for a different judge, because Madison County, there's too much bad blood involved between that office and his department and Ben. In 2019, Huntsville police officers were involved in a shooting, suicidal person. And I'm going to preface this by saying the officers did exactly what they should have done, and I don't want them or anyone to have to go through what I'm going through to get my husband out of prison. But it begs the question, what does the district attorney's office have against Ben Darby? The officers were called to a suicidal subject at an apartment complex she came out of her apartment, was waving a gun around, would go back inside her apartment. So they sent patrol to make the initial contact. The officers knocked on the door and removed themselves away from the door. She came out, and there was a pistol in her front pocket. You could see it. And they said, put your hands up. She had her hands up, went like this, smoked her. Why? Because she's going for a threat. They're not in prison. They never had a trial. They were never charged. I'm not asking for them to be. But what's the difference? What's the difference between this and this?
Yeah, this is more dangerous.
Yeah, because they already have it in their hand.
Yeah. So I'm sure, because you're going through this, people have reached out to you, and you know of some other cases of officers that are being charged for things like this. Is this something that you see as a real issue in the country, not just Alabama, where there's a lot of officers in these same situations? Because I just interviewed a guy, and I was like, this, you obviously did nothing wrong, mm-hmm. but they put him through the ringer for 2 years trying to charge him. Mm-hmm. And it seems like, based on whether it was this political climate of defunding and anti-police, that these district attorneys, to get favoritism in their demographic to win the vote, have gone after law enforcement officers in these clear-cut cases of them not committing a crime. Is this something that you've seen as being a pattern or an issue, or is this an anomaly? So
I haven't had anyone contact me that's gone through a similar situation. I know about Matt Dagus in California. Mm-hmm. I've spoken with his wife, and it's not the same situation, but it's still, he was justified in what he did, and he got put through the ringer. I don't know if it's, to me, Ben's case is the only one that I know of, because I don't have time to go look up other cases, because I'm still active duty. I still work every day. I've got 3 full-time jobs. My department, getting Ben out of prison, and then trying to maintain my sanity, So I've got other people working on things to help me navigate all this, because I've never gone through this. I mean, who's gone through this before? It's not like you can go to the phone book or go online and say, call whoever, hey, you went through the same exact thing. What do we do? You know, we're completely in the dark. So I don't know of other officers who have gone through something similar to this. I'm sure they're out there. I don't know who they are.
So this is pretty extreme, obviously. This is an extreme circumstance. That, have you seen anybody in your network or people that you've met who are willing to go to bat? Like, where's the governor? Where are the popular people in this situation that are advocating for Ben's release?
Yeah. So we've had, from the very beginning, we had the Blue Justice Project, which is a very homegrown organization out of Pennsylvania. She was an officer, was involved in a shooting, got charged and was cleared, got acquitted. She retired and started her nonprofit to help police. She's been with us since day one. Lisa Merkel, godsend. And then we talked with you. You were the second person that Ben talked to publicly about it. And then I had reached out to the Resiliency Project in California and went and spent a week with them trying to get everything out. And then from that, we've had people, I've been able to go and speak on their shows like I am today. And then just recently, the Pipe Hitter Foundation picked us up, which is huge because, Eddie was thrown into prison for 9 months wrongfully. And just like Ben, he's wrongfully in prison for 11 months now. Having the support of all these people has been huge. The governor is aware of our situation from what people tell me. She had posted, Police Week is always in May. And she had posted some, I stand with law enforcement, and people I had tell me that they wrote her, DM'd her account, which I know she probably doesn't look at it, but contacted her, if you support law enforcement, support Ben Darby and get him out of prison. Someone has asked me, why can't she pardon him? That right to the governor was taken away by a previous governor because he got charged with something, so they didn't want him to pardon himself. So Governor Ivey cannot pardon Ben. For Ben to get a pardon, it would have to go through the Board of Pardon and Paroles, and or the district attorney and judge who made the sentence. Well, the district attorney and judge are anti-Ben and have been from the beginning, so I don't see them saying, "Oh yeah, we screwed up. We're gonna let him go," because it's gonna make them look bad. So it's not an easy, we'll just give him a pardon and get out. Like, there's a lot more that goes into that. The Attorney General knows because I've talked to him personally, and I know of other people from Huntsville Police Department and other departments that have talked to him about our case. But I'm waiting. It's July. It's July 7th. And he's still in prison. And the Attorney General has the ability to do something about it and say, hey, we're not going to prosecute this case. He didn't do anything wrong. He followed the case law, and it would be unethical, and it is unethical for him to be in prison for doing what he was taught and trained to do by the state of Alabama.
How's Ben doing?
It's day to day.
Is he in isolation because of his police?
He's in protective custody, but he called me when I was in my layover yesterday, and I said, how you doing? Because you can hear it in his voice, whatever the day is. And he said, he's not in a federal prison playing shuffleboard and drinking martinis. He's in prison with bad guys. Yes, he's in protective custody, so he's up there with other cops who, have messed around with kids or had like theft one, auto theft or something like that, or they have killed people. He's in, but then he's in there with there's some government people that are in there that have been arrested on whatever their charge was. But then they have catch-outs from general population because they have a price on their head for whatever they did in Gen Pop. So to protect them, they put those people who should not be, they're not PC qualified, are in protective custody with him. So yesterday he was sitting in the day room area. I mean, I don't know what it looks like because I've never been in there, but I guess just this open area with tables. And this guy comes up and says, I'm going to fight you. And this guy is known to have shanks on him all the time. And Ben's very aware, you know, he doesn't put himself in a bad situation. And he saw the guy and saw him coming towards him. And he looked at his, you know, he did the whole assessment, watched his waistband, watched his hands. And the guy was trying to fight him. And he tried to head rush him, or, you know. And Ben distanced himself and raised his fist up. And he's like, dude, you don't want to fight me. There's no reason to fight. He was high on meth. There's drugs in there. Of course. And the guy was high, and Ben had to talk him down. And Ben had some other guys that are in there with him come over just in case it did go south to help him out. The problem is Ben can't defend himself because he's on appeal. So if he gets a prison charge,
oh yeah,
he's screwed.
He's done.
So unless he's getting killed, he can't help himself out. If the guy has a knife or a shank in his hand, then he's gonna protect his life, but he's not gonna just throw down to throw down. And the guards had saw it and came in and took the guy out for 20 minutes, like 20-minute timeout, and then had him come back in. Like, he's not safe. They have inmate on inmates assault. They had 5 in the month of June. They had a suicide in his dorm in PC, and Ben said that it was a black male. The guy was white by the time that the guards came to look at him.
Because he had already suffocated himself or killed himself.
Like, they're not under constant supervision like they're supposed to be. Alabama Department of Corrections is under a federal lawsuit right now, and the FBI is investigating them for inhumane treatment and conditions. Ben has rats that live in his cell or in that area with him, just running around rampant. They don't do anything about it. He gets 2 meals a day on the weekends because they don't have the manpower to feed them 3 meals a day, which their food it's prison food, so it's not like free world food, but it's a day-to-day, for the both of us, it's a day-to-day thing. And thankfully, very rarely have we both had a bad day at the same time. You know, because I can't call him. I have to wait for him to call me. That's just the rules. So we always, you know, how are you doing? Is there anything going? And it's all recorded. So I can't talk to him freely about things that I need to talk to him about. I'm allowed to see him once a month in an open, like, cafeteria room environment. So I get once a month to tell him, this is going on. We need to talk about this. Because they're listening to his conversations. The state is, to use during the appeal. So I can't tell him important information. I can't have that spouse relationship with him and talk to him about important things that he needs to know about. So I have to take notes throughout the month and then memorize those notes because I can't bring anything in there with me.
And then when you're in private, you can communicate it to him.
Right. But I have an hour and a half to do it.
How are you doing through all this? I mean, it seems like you're taking on a lot.
Yeah. It's day to day. I have a very big support group. People, like, when this first happened, I didn't buy groceries, I think, for 2 months. People were either bringing me food, dropping it off, taking me out, just trying to minimize the burden and the stress of Ben's in prison. You're by yourself right now, and you're trying to navigate this situation that I have no experience in, you know? It's hard, but I have a strong faith in that honestly gets me through going through all this. My church family has been a big support. People in my department, you know, when I first came back to work, it was a mixed emotions because it's awkward. You know, I'm a cop. He was a cop. He's a cop that did his job that now is in prison, and I'm still coming to work every day. You know, And I've got several people at work. Hey, are you okay? Do you need to talk? You know, I don't trust a lot of people for obvious reasons, but I do have my core 4 or 5 people that I can call at any time of the day and say, hey, I need to talk to you. I need to get this off my chest, you know? And that's been a huge help. But it's hard, you know, to say, like, I broke down the other day, buying a breakfast sandwich from a place that Ben and I would go and get breakfast sandwiches at. And, I started crying. It's little things that you don't think are going to trigger it. And then it triggers it, and it's like, oh, you know, he's been in for 11 months. I'll see if everything goes according to plan in the sense of visitation doesn't get canceled, because that's all. They've almost canceled visitation the past 2 months. I will have seen him for a total of 14 hours the entire year, person face to face.
If the appeals process goes through, what's the best case scenario and what's the worst case scenario?
So, worst case scenario, I believe we've already gone through, because he could have been dead. Best case scenario, they reverse and render him, meaning they reverse the conviction, he gets acquitted, and they drop the case. They don't try and have a retrial. Most likely scenario, they reverse and remand, so they acquit him and have a retrial. I guess in the appeal, the worst case scenario is he's stuck there until his parole date, which is 22 years.
He won't get parole for 22 years?
Yeah. I think his first chance at parole is in 2043. And
that seems excessive.
And you've got, it's an excessive sentence. And we had, prior to sentencing, we had asked people to write character witness statements for him, stating how he's not a bad guy. There was no malice. He didn't wake up that day and say, I'm going to go to work and kill someone. Bam. There's Parker. I'll kill him. That never happened. We had people write letters to his testimony and their interaction with him, how he was a good man of good morals. He wasn't a murderer like they're saying that he is. We had, I think, 72 character witness letters come in, presented to the judge. I guarantee you she didn't read them, because when I was allowed to go to sentencing that day and sit in the courtroom with him because I testified for him. And so he had 5 witnesses that were allowed to talk for him, and then he was allowed to witness for himself. And so we had our pastor, his lieutenant, me, his dad, and a childhood friend of his all testify to Ben's character. And when I got up there to go swear in, I stood and, I took my oath that I was going to say the truth. And I sat down, and as soon as I sat down, she sat back and she never looked at me. Usually when you talk to someone, you make eye contact and you listen to what they're saying. She just scribbled on her paper, twiddled her thumbs, looked around, just waited until I was done. Next witness to come out, swear, look at them as they swear, sit down. Next witness. Like, she already had her mind made up. Like, sentencing was a waste of time, because everything that the district attorney had brought up during sentencing, she took notes on. Everything that our side did, she had she didn't pay attention to it at all.
Since there's no murder 1 or murder 2 charge, the sentence reflects deliberate intent. Like, he had a plan, or he went in there and was like, I'm going to murder somebody today. Right? So what was the minimum sentence he could have gotten? What was the maximum sentence he could have gotten?
So 20 to life.
Was a minimum.
20 years is your minimum. So if he just got 20 years, he would be eligible to be out on bond during the appeal process.
Yep.
So he would
be eligible for parole 10 years in, or how many years in?
I don't know. He would be home, so he wouldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
It's not an option, so honestly I didn't look into it.
Yeah.
I just know that if he was just given the 20 years, They would set his bond for however much money, and we would get that so he could be home during the appeal. The district attorney said we want a minimum of 25 years because he's shown no remorse. Well,
if you're not guilty,
you're not
remorse.
You're not sorry. I'm not sorry I had to defend my life and the other two officers because you didn't want to listen to my commands. I'm not sorry about that. And Ben wasn't either. He's sorry that it came to that, but he's not sorry for what he did.
Yeah.
Because he defended his life and the other two officers. They didn't have 3 line of duty deaths that day because he stopped the threat to them. And so 20 years in a day or longer, you're stuck day for day until your appeal comes back. And the frustrating thing is there's no timeline or time frame for the judges to make a decision. So we're at the mercy of them. Hey, we're going to look at the Ben Darby case today and go through it.
The maximum sentence in Alabama is what?
Is life.
Is the death penalty.
Yeah.
And Alabama still has a pretty aggressive death row. I mean,
yeah. I mean, so there's a guy that Ben's in PC with right now who was on death row for I think 15 years, and beat it, and then somehow he got reconvicted. I don't know the whole thing, but he was a death row inmate, got off death row, and now is put back into PC.
Day for day, we are waiting on the appeal process from the state attorney general. That's what we're waiting on.
From the Court of Criminal Appeals, yes.
What else can you do? I mean, do you have a good lawyer? Or do you have the funds to have the right lawyer? What else do we got to do here?
Yeah, so I'm a cop and we don't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, which we knew. Everyone knows that going into it, so I'm not getting onto it that way. But it is a very large financial burden for me and his family to get the lawyers that we need to get him out. And it's not, you know, because a lot of people have said like, well, your lawyers didn't do what they should have done and they didn't serve you well. Every time we objected to something, the judge dismissed it. Every time the DA objected to something, she granted it. So it's not that they didn't try. They were cut at their hamstrings every time they got a chance. No. We never had anything go in our favor. We have hired additional legal help, but you know, we're 6 figures in right now into his legal fees for just the appeal. Thank God Huntsville City paid his original trial because that was $125,000. You know, and Ben and I are talking, we got that much of a head start into this. But yeah, we're fundraising right now. Pipe Hitter Foundation, if you go on their website, which I can give you the link for that, they have a donation portal. We have a website, standwithdarby.com, that has a donation portal on there as well, for people to give, because it's expensive, you know, and I net, I think like high 30s, low 40s every year. And we're 6 figures into his legal fees, you know.
Unions are helping you?
It's not a union state. It's a right to work. We'll see this. The National Fraternal Order of Police, which is the biggest police organization in the nation, is backing Ben. They wrote an amicus brief, demanding for another trial because Ben was not given the proper trial procedure. So if you have, like I said, the chief, the mayor, the city council, and the FOP backing you, you obviously didn't do anything wrong, because if you did, they would have separated you immediately.
So what are they doing? The National Fraternal Order of Police, what are they doing when it comes to the state appeal? Are they just writing letters? Is that all they could do?
I don't know everything that they can do. They wrote a brief to the courts siding with us, defending Ben. I think it was like a 32-page report that they wrote.
Oh, wow.
So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, because they've got a million other things nationwide that they have to look at. but they chose to help Ben Darby out.
Is that report available for public viewing?
It's on our website.
Okay. Maybe we should disseminate that as well.
Yeah. We have a lot of articles. Our appeal brief is on the website. The decision that the Attorney General made in 2018, how he could not ethically charge that officer, that whole multiple page review is on the website. There's several documents on there.
I'm just mind blown right now. I mean, I physically want to do a hostage rescue and just break him out of that prison. It just boggles my mind.
Yeah, and it's, like, it's the worst prison in Alabama, but it's the only protective custody facility. So, I mean, it looks like the Wild West. You drive up, it's not funny. It's just nervous reaction. You drive up there and it's chain link with razor wire. And then it's got like these wooden, like out here out west, you have like the wooden posts with the skull head or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not a skull head. It's like the logo of the prison. But it's so old.
Looks like an old outpost.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It looks like an old outpost, And I go in there and I get searched. Like I'm a bad person. Yeah, and they don't know that I'm a cop. And I don't make that known. We go in there and you got to get searched, and then they roll the door and you go through, and they roll it behind you, and then they roll another door and you can go into the cafeteria. And I get about an hour and a half with him once a month. He looks okay. He's leaner, a lot leaner, obviously, because he's not eating good food. He doesn't have access to a gym. They don't have the PC guys go over there. So he does, prison workout in his cell. He's allowed to go outside once a day for, I think, an hour, at least an hour. When he first got arrested, he was in solitary for 19 days in Madison County Jail. He was in 23 in, 1 hour out. So that hour that he had out, he would call me, and then he'd call his parents. And then he got moved to Kilby, which is the state processing area for prisoners. They don't have PC, so they put him in a cell, a 6x8 cell, and he would get a 15-minute break every 4 days. The media found out before I did that he got moved to Kilby. I went 56 hours from the time that from when I last heard from him during that time to the time that he was allowed a phone call at Kilby. And when I got the phone call, I had 20 seconds, and then it hung up and changed over to a phone tree, and I had to put money on the account so that I could talk to my husband. So I'm trying to go through all that, and he keeps calling me back on the other line because the phone got disconnected. So I would try to take the call, but I wasn't able to talk to him. It would just go to a phone tree. So I'm trying to get this set up, not knowing if I'm going to get another phone call, because that was his first phone call in 56 hours that he was able to give to me. I get it all set up, and it says, we'll reconnect you, and the phone goes dead. So I, of course, am a wreck, and I'm at work when this happens. And I go into my lieutenant's office, and I said, I got to go. I'm taking my break. I'm done. I'm turning my radio off, and I'm going to the gym. I need a break. And he was like, you can go home, do whatever you need to do. Don't worry about it. And thankfully, Ben was able to give me a phone call 20 minutes later. And it was the first time that I was able to talk to him. And I was like, are you okay? And he was like, this is where I'm at. They've got me in a 6x8, and I'm not allowed out for 15 minutes. He had 15 minutes to, you can call your wife or take a shower. Your pick. The time's running. Clock's running. So he would call me 15 minutes every time he was allowed, and then take a sink bath in his cell. The conditions that he's in. He is not a prisoner. He is not a murderer. He should have never been charged. They never had enough to charge him. But politically, we're able to finagle that. And now he's sitting in prison until the judges... With murders. Yeah. And when he was in Kilby, so because of his PC status, he should have never been around other inmates. for whatever reason, he was put into a pod of convicted murderers, one of which killed a cop. And he's sitting in there with them. And thankfully, they didn't know who he was. Because I'm sure if the cop killer especially, if they knew, there's your easy shot to kill another cop. They
have nothing to lose.
Exactly. They know that they're done for the rest of their life, or for the next 20 years minimum. He's not safe. He's not a murderer. He's not safe. And I'm basically stuck until these judges look at it.
What about Congress? Have you reached out to Congress and your Senate? I mean, have you talked to any federal?
I've talked to 2 senators in Alabama, but nothing really. We talked about the situation, but nothing has come of it.
But no congressman or woman?
No.
Okay, so I think that's the next step. I mean, I'm just trying to think outside the box here for. Yeah. Well, the next step is national news.
Yeah, so pipe hitter. I'm actually gonna be talking with Tommy Larian Monday.
Okay.
On her Outkick show.
Yeah.
Outkick coverage. I'm hoping that the people that the Pipe Hitter Foundation has set me up with, I've been on radio, 10 and 25-minute radio bits throughout the country over the last 3 weeks, just calling them and telling him the very concise version of what happened. And we've seen some support come in from that, which every month, every dollar, every penny that we get that comes through these fundraising portals goes straight to legal fees. I don't live off of it. I live off of my paycheck, and I make it by on my paycheck. But I don't use these people that donate. I don't take any of that. I don't. Coming out here, I paid for that.
You're paying debt.
I'm paying
on legal fees.
Yeah,
because you're in debt.
Yeah,
a lot.
I'm 6 figures in debt right now.
Have you talked to anybody from Fox?
No.
Okay. And then nobody from Congress.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm assuming that the people that Pipe Hitter has me set up with, they're my media guys, guy and girl. So they're dealing with all that, trying to get me set up on all these things. I'm assuming that that's coming down the pike. But I'm waiting, They're trying to get stuff scheduled, and then I work nights. So I've come off of a shift and gone on a radio bit, dead asleep, but I'm trying to tell our story because I'll do whatever I can to get them out. If I have to stay up and not only get 3 or 4 hours of sleep and then go into shift that night, unfortunately, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't need to be there, and I'm desperate to get him home. You don't realize how much you don't realize your marriage vows until you're put into a hard situation. And I meant them when I said them October 2nd, 2016, but I didn't realize what they actually meant fully. I mean, I knew what they meant, but fully understand, to be there in sickness and health, during the good and the bad times, during the ups and the downs. We're in a down right now. We're really down, and we're trying to fight to get out of this pit that we're in. And anyone who would be willing to help us get a innocent man out of prison, yeah, I'll take anything I can get.
Yeah. Let's get off the podcast and get it populated, and then take the link to the podcast and share it, and then try to reach out to points of contact.
Okay.
And see what we could do. I appreciate you coming out here and talking with me. We got a lot of work to do, but the story is the most important part of this because people need to know.
Mm-hmm.
This is crazy.
I appreciate you being there for us, since 18, and then having me come out and share, because people don't know.
We wanted to do it earlier, but I know there was a whole bunch of things going on.
Yeah, scheduling, and no, I totally, half of that was on me, so.
All right. Guys, the links are in the notes below, and then I want to do this tactical review thing. I'll do that on my own, and then we'll get hot on some strategy to see how we could help affect this. If you're listening to this, share the link, tell people, make noise. I mean, unfortunately, it's how these things work, where if a state attorney general or local attorney general knows in the public eye that they're being perceived as being one way or the other, they have to come out and make statements, make effective change. And hopefully that's what this leads to.
Yeah.
Because it's needed right now. Thank you.
Thank you.